Thank you for sitting down. And thank you for becoming quiet. So, we talked about temporalities in production, but also creation. We talked about the role of the body, different bodies and different temporalities. Francesca started to talk about spaces as a new criteria of where she wants to go, what kind of spaces she wants to create through the museum and within the community, and about who will see what and why. We have a very active listener with us, also an artist who's writing a manifesto out of our discussions. And Leila Peacock, I would like to ask you to ask the next questions to lead into the last section before we open the discussion completely, and where it leads us into the future.
Manifesto is such an intense word to use for anything, but it certainly will be a kind of meditation on the discussion, and just looking at where the discussion has gone. I think less manifesto, more something that will somehow capture the poetics of process, which is maybe somehow missing in printmaking because it's so focused on knowledge and practicalities that maybe it didn't seem necessary to have a poetics of printmaking. But there's something I was thinking about that has come up in conversations that I've had with Michael, which I always found really interesting, is a printmaker's relationship with pressure and the natural limitations produced by how the pressure is applied and how it's created, but also that you were talking about the fact that actually the whole thing happens in this moment where the ink jumps from the plate onto the paper, and that this is a really sort of nice way of thinking about it, but that we don't actually have a word, or that you have been trying to find a word for this exact point where that happens. And so actually when you're looking at a print, you're really looking at this very precise millisecond of transference. And if you could say a bit more about pressure, that would be really helpful.
That was a question for me. Well, it makes a crackling sound usually when something transforms into under pressure. Yes, please.
I just think the word is contact.
No, but you need the mic for the...
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to say, I think the word we're talking about is contact.
Well, there's just a moment of, we're again talking, okay, we're in the poetics of pressure, we're in the poetics of touch, which are the performative and the process-based moments in printmaking, which obviously open a lot of fields. You were talking about the body, we're all talking about what's happening, and we can talk about the leftovers that are the results of this pressure, which kind of is which leads us into the future. We can say it leaves a trace, like this contact leaves a trace. So a trace is something that shows that something was present, like it's looking back, talking about temporality again, it's looking back. While traces, the word trace is often used in observation of nature, of something that happened, but there's also the word of a track, eine Fährte auf Deutsch, I don't know in French, and that's often used when you go hunting. You follow actually the track of an animal left in the snow, so that leads you to something. So there's a difference between a residue of the past, and there's a difference between something that leads you into the future. So I think the question on pressure, I think pressure can make things change shape, and if we follow up very closely, if we try to read what this transformation is, that's, to me, that's the track that leads into the future.
Wasn't there a moment that you were speaking about chimeras and as the moment of, do you hear me, Miss? As the moment, if we go to the etymology of the word, it comes from ancient mythology. It's also used in modern biology as an entity which is composed by different parts that are recognizable and are from different origins. And somehow, what comes out from the press after the moment of maximum pressure is, and which is called the chimeric moment somehow in your own words, is because something what is coming out is exactly this. Is what you can't control, and as you don't know what's it's going to be the combination of these parts. So the pressure here means it's the agent that opens up to the unknown.
Let me just quickly interfere here to clarify things for a wider public. So Michael talks a lot about chimeric processes and working with and through the chimeric and the chimera. Just a quick word before that to the etymology of things, right? So to follow tracks in French could mean la piste, huh? So which leads to the future, but it's also l'imprint, which goes back to printing. The chimeric that Anna talks about, we need to clarify that a moment to really talk about it. So before we give it back to the panel and talk about pressure with Inma, what is it when you talk about the chimeric in printing?
So I did this thing called a dissertation, and it was on release and control in print. And I was coming from the term of the chimera, and the chimera, it means a lot. It's this mixed animal. It's a lot in very different fields of science, in the arts and in the crafts. But it's also something that if you try to grasp it, it dissolves. And that's something that is very, for me, a crucial moment in the arts, that what's your distance? What's your zoom? And so there's and if you try to grab it, you'll change it forever. And that's actually also happening in printing presses at the moment where the pressure is the highest, which is usually under the press, under the roll, like when you really press, that's where the image exists. And that's actually a place you can't go to because there's so much pressure there. That's where you just, and if you go there, you will change the image forever. And that's in this definition, it's a very typical chimeric moment. If you try to grab it, if you try to grab what's actually happened, where the magic actually happens, you're gonna destroy it. So you can always work around on what's before, and you can work around on what's after. In a nutshell, that's why we're talking about chimera. So pressure, actually, to come back to your question, also to give it back to your group, I think pressure also creates a space where you can't control, and it kind of defines a thing. And this is also, I mean, this can become political. How much do we control? How much are we control freaks in terms of what we do? And I just can't derive a question out of it. I think that's your role.
So not to put you too much on the pressure, but this moment that Michael just defined, right? The chimeric moment of, there's this one moment where you can't interfere, where the machine takes over. You can interfere, he says, before and after. Is that the moment where the poetic space opens up? You talked about the poetics of printing, and now Leila calls it the poetics of pressure. Is this the moment? Or are we missing something?
Well, I think this is one of the moments. There's many moments, I think, in a, if you wanted to relate to the printing moment, yeah, it could be. I was just maybe to take it in another direction, because we are, I mean, now referring to pressure, I think that there are different levels and ways of applying pressure in the context of print. I'm thinking of Mikael's project on printing animals and how, in a way that relates to a project that I'm working right now, and both, well, projects are related to Svalbard. I have been, in my latest research, working with frottage, that is, I would say, the most basic form of printing, where there is no machine involved.
Everybody knows what frottage means? Good. As a technique, you put a paper over a coin and you rub it with your pencil. Huh?
Yeah, so, well, or called rubbing printing in English, but I would say that that is the, well, exploring the archaeology of prints, also conceptually, that would lead us to think of like what is pressure and how pressure is applied to kind of like make an image happen. And for example, I've been like working with this in the context of printing fossils and printing fossils outdoors in Svalbard. Actually, to kind of also use that same metaphor of how, I mean, talking about the poetics of the process, it's contained everywhere, because if you think of fossils, how they are formed, it's a combination, well, to put it in a nutshell and simplify it, but it's a combination of temperature, humidity, lack of oxygen, and pressure that happens through sedimentation in a very specific place. And that is how natural imprint generates. I mean, like a fossil is a matrix that the earth actually has generated, and it contains information. And for example, that to me was fascinating to think of how that natural process that, well, from a geological time is something that goes out of our perception as humans, but that how to register that, especially having elements that are so heavy so that I cannot take with me, but still record those imprints and mimicking a similar process, I mean, with what is within my reach. And instead of thinking, okay, how I register all this and then run it through a press and then eventually like multiply that image, how can I go and really touch that kind of skin of a forest that doesn't exist anymore in a form of fossil, and still like using paper that, again, like goes back to the genealogy of things, also talking about material, applying a minimum level of pressure where I will not destroy a stone that apparently is very heavy and indestructible, but when it is a fossil, because of how it's carbonized and everything, it can actually crack very easily. That is also what Mikael is doing in many of his experiments through the press, where he's just like basically destroying things. Well, this is a form of seeing it, but how destruction also brings to creation and the, again, interaction of materials. So pressure, I mean, maybe this is not just a closed answer, but that's picking up back on this idea of the poetics, that is just, I would say that maybe that's where it inhabits, but that there's not just one way of applying pressure or understanding pressure, and maybe that's where the magic lives.
I mean, in a lot of ways, we tend to forget that a lot of the materials and materiality that you use in printmaking traditionally is a result of pressure, right? And the difference between coal and the diamond is pressure. The ink we use is the residue of burning trees, right? And all these kind of things, these are much bigger processes and much bigger happenings in a different temporality altogether than the temporality of human bodies and human production. And one of the main problems maybe we're facing today is that we don't understand the difference. This is why we extract so much. And then we come back to this, and there will be contradiction on storytelling and the spaces, the spaces of society. But this aspect of creating something in a space and how we create something in a space, in a way, it's when I hear what you're saying, and you come from such different perspectives, right? You have such different roles in this printmaking process. And Chris and I have been talking just very quickly in the intermission about this and how what this space is, which we actually create here at the moment when it comes to printmaking. Maybe you can. Now the pressure is on.
Definitely, yes. Well, I was actually also talking to Michael about this. And it's, I think, a completely different aspect that is coming in now. But we, as a whole, here on the panel, we all play our part in the role of printmaking and where it's going to go in the future. Yes, I mean, I don't really know what else to say to that, but I think it's also a lot of people who do their part in a completely different role. That will also define where we're actually going to go to with printmaking. I don't know, Michael, do you want to?
I think, well, there's, no, let me, oh, like this. This has a short, but that's a bit too early. I really like the different roles we have that we play here on this panel. And I think that's very rare to have, you know, coming from the humanities, art history, or collectors, or publishers, or printers, or artists, having this whole group here and talking about the same subject. Usually these are like really niche conferences where everyone comes from the same field. So I think that's already quite something to have this panel here together. So I use this moment to say thank you. And but continuing, we were talking about the pressure, about this moment that was transferring. It's about the magic moment. And I think that's something we could ask each one of you. Where's your magic moment as a publisher, as a graphic designer, as a printer, as an art historian? Where's that? And is this a moment you wish for, or is that the moment you wish for when you, what would you wish for in printing? I see Tommy nodding very heavily. Take the mic.
Yeah, it's I think we should not be afraid, because it's a big question, but a big question doesn't need a big answer. So maybe the question is much too big, and I think this magic moment is still a black box, technically seen, and we can leave this black box that I'm printer since 45 years, and I still don't know what I'm doing really, and I think that's okay. That's how it is. We have to practice. We have to do the same mistakes again, and maybe make the new mistakes a little bit different. And I think it's a really, when I got a mail from you yesterday, Damian, or maybe it was Friday, you had really big questions, and I said, okay, but we don't need big answers. We just have to try to do our best as a publisher, as an artist, and I think that's all we can do. And this magic moment I take home, and that's okay. I don't have an answer.
No, I don't have anything to add. Perfect.
It's all magic. No, I could explain it a bit. For us, we have a certain point of magic moment. Back to the idea of our work is to invite contemporary artists, which are, let's say, in the focus. The jury is selecting or talking about artists which are interesting. Some of they see it, in exhibitions, in galleries, on art fairs, whatever. So we talk about the artists, we invite them, and they make something. And the magic moment is really, if you could think, see that the artist is really bringing his ideas via one of these printing techniques into a series, which is really for many artists a big step, because if you normally paint or you're a sculptor or whatever and invited to publish your ideas somehow, it's really difficult, as I tried to explain before. It is the question if it is digital or in one of the traditional techniques, but we often have the situation that the artist really finds a new way, a new kind of a new explanation for that what he wants or she wants to say. So because this is what we are trying to bring our members. It is to bring the content, to present the artist and to present them with a group of 6 normally, where they can show what their work is about. And if they really get the point to bring their expression via a new medium into the public, this is really a magic moment, I can say, because we have many others which just send us or give us ideas to reproduce and say, okay, these are 10 drawings which are really nice and typical for my work. You can reproduce them, or can make whatever, a 6-screen print, or you can make a digital print. And this is not magic, because this is the stupid way of just reproducing things. So the other thing is really, it takes a long process and a long talking to the printers. It needs a good guy at the press who really understands the artist and can take his hands and can guide him into this medium. And then if something comes out where you could really say, okay, this is new, but this is still what it is about, then this is a magic moment for us.
My magic moments would be being the witness of all the visual languages that artists invent. And I think I'm sure I will always be amazed at what artists can do with all the techniques that exist and how they can always renew the use of these techniques. And I think printmaking is about this, is about using whatever you find interesting to make something new. And I love how Michael does these very experimental and fine art prints, and how someone like Sébastien Métro will act as his own publisher, his own printer, and do small prints at home and printing them on demand with a spoon, something very simple. And we have all this range of practices, and I think being that witness, the witness of all those art practices, and then bringing them to the audience is what makes my magic moments.
So part of my contradiction to Francesca's intermission, Federica's intermission would be that we follow la piste, we follow the tracks of this magic moment into the future, right? And also coming back to what Théophile has said about the spaces within a publication, and you, Dirk, made a distinction between to exhibit and to publish, which is an interesting distinction. And this pertains, I think, to the future of printmaking, the future of bookmaking. I work a lot in India, and a lot of artists in India are coming back to the techniques of printmaking because the digital space seems to be contaminated, right? The digital space is a political space in India, is the space of Modi, is the space of these new alt-right movements, these populist movements that use the digital space in a very specific way, very successfully. And if yesterday with the inauguration of Trump in the States, I mean, that's happening if we are here or not. The front row of 250 seats were the biggest tech companies, digital companies, that all fell into line now with these new political movements that use digital spaces in a very specific way. So if I talk to printmakers in India, and there it might seem a little bit more pressing than in Switzerland, but I'm sure we will have to deal with this very soon as well. Printing and the temporalities of printing, the magic of printing, the body in printing, as you said, Inma, it's also defending not just a social space or a space of identity, but a renewed political space in the sense of resistance and resilience. This would be my thesis now to start us off on the last leg towards the future of printing. Because the techniques might be different, right? I mean, there's a certain familiarity between new processes, although you do very different things in different ways, in as much as the experimental and explosion of freedom, the moment of the crackling sound where the egg rolls around and creates its own thing, seems to be a central thing, so control and loss of control. We talked with Marco Ganz, who's sitting here, who's also an artist who makes prints, who uses, let's say, just two color fields, overlapping with each other in a painstaking process of gaining control over printing, also in collaboration a lot with Tommy, right? So these are like processes which seem very at the opposite end of how to create in print in the future. But I think there's a big similarity which is on top of everything, and this also relates to what you say, that we create this field together, right? That we somehow, it's us now, also the public. I mean, we do all the things we do, making a museum, making a print, making an exhibition, collecting, making multiples of books. We do this for a public. We just don't do it for ourselves. So this is my final question, and then we can take it also then with the wider audience, is the future of printing in the social, poetical, but also political field and the temporalities involved. And I want to ask like a real question, but just let you react to what I tried to sketch as one of the big fields of engagement for prints in the future. I mean, you never see yourself as a political artist, but maybe you just became one.
Yes. Yes. Obviously, as an artist, I always ask myself, and I have to these days, is like, who am I here? What is my role here? How am I working? So what is the medium I choose for? And the third thing is also what you were mentioning, whom am I working for? And because I described the classical art genius artist's idea as something tragical, and that means also how can we get out of this? So as an artist, I have to think about whom am I actually working for, and not just working for myself. So talking about the future of printing, I see this making art, and here it's through printing, as a form of thinking that is something I can share. I can invite a lot of people too, and from all the fields we could all print together something. And it's not that I'm trying to teach something with that, but it's more that I can create with this art making process. I can create a space where you can explore things, where you can go after ideas, where you can learn something about how the grape explodes when you run it through the press. You learn something about this whole thing, and it just leaves, that's what I also call the poetic space of printing, of the process of printing. And that's where it can become very political when suddenly when you take the agents that are involved, when you take them seriously, and always knowing, as an artist, I play a certain role, I enable things, I initiate things, that there's always a role, there's an expectations, I can subvert it, I can fulfill it, obviously. But generally, the role as an artist here, I see as creating a space where reflection and meeting is possible. That's what the arts always were good for, to bring people together, no matter what they wanted, but it's in church or in the guts, but that's where I see it.
It's funny because, for example, if we think about the manifesto of Sister Corita Kent, it's a manifesto of printing, and then it became completely also something else, and it's super political. So I also really like how sometimes something that doesn't have the intention of being political, indirectly, it immediately is perceived, or it has this kind of encouragement to read between the lines, and we're not just talking and thinking about printing, but like how to behave as human animals in society in a way.
Maybe as a short add-on, because it was earlier in the other session we talked about how do the students actually react. These days I teach sometimes at the University of the Arts in Zurich, and all I actually do is I put 2 printing presses in the middle of the space and tell them here's the ink, and I tell them that my job is to give them a space to work and not to talk or to write, but it's actually to work and to talk while working. And the question was, I think, how can we get the kids back to printing? And you said, you brought the example from India about contaminated digital spaces, but just the feedback I get is just to give space to actually experiment, to not focus on the goal. I also tell them, I don't want you to make beautiful stuff. I just tell them, and you take home immediately what you did. I don't want to have it. I don't want to store anything. Just take it away. It's not interesting what you actually, what's the end result. The important thing to me is work, and I see that there's a lot of fertile ground there within students these days, 20-year-olds these days. That's my experience.
But you are working with art students, that's correct? No. Yeah. You know, sometimes I have a young group from the school, and I have the same input, and very often in the end they don't know what to print, and then one of the boys say, let's print money, you know, because it has to make sense. And then I also start with them to make a calculation how expensive it will be to print this money, and then they say, oh, maybe we lose money if we start making 4 stones and then embossing, and I think and I know it's the last round now we have, and if we talk about the future of print, we sadly have to talk about money, because somebody has to pay the prints, and I would like to give the microphone to Dirk, because he has the worst job. He has to pay 2 people. He has to pay the artist and the printer, and he gets the money back if he can sell something. So that's why you're printing on demand. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, that's correct. And I think this is also, in a way, it's a political job as we understand it. I mean, it is this year we're getting 100 years old, so we are founded 100 years ago, and it was in the Weimar Republic. So it was in a time when it was even in the official politics, it was clear that, let's say, the education, the cultural education of the public, of the people, has to be forced and has to be pushed. And at this time, there were growing up several workers associations, Arbeitervereine, they were called, and we came out of this tradition. And I think it still works in a way. We are, of course, we are not offensive political in our content, let's say, but the idea of producing art for everybody and trying to work against the structure of our society, which goes so much into some very rich and a lot of very poor, and this is scissor of the society which is going on. And we try to keep the balance a bit and say, okay, and our art is available for more or less everybody who really wants it. I mean, 45 euros for a print is cheap, and it's a production costs finally. So this is our idea. We are not a non-profit organization, and I think this is also in a way political now, and it is getting more and more important to have these kind of democratic and basic structures to be kept on. And Tommy, is on the other side, right, is also a part for the artists to become known. I mean, this is also part of our job, so it's also kind of political part, because for a young artist, it is a chance to get spread all over Germany. Let's say we have close to 100 groups all over Germany where we present 2 times a year our selection, where we present the new artist positions and invite the members to come there to have a look at these positions and to discuss them and to make their decision. They have to select, they have to order somehow. And so finally, especially for the younger artists and let's say young and mid-career artists, it's a chance to get known all over Germany on this way. And they get, as I said said before, they also get the fee for it, a honorarium for it. It is fixed, but it is for a group of 6 works, for example. I can see it clearly. It is just open and transparent. It is 8,500 euros, and this is what they get for 6 motifs in the made. And of course, the motive can mean it is printed 100 times or 500 or 600 times. It is always a fixed flat. But this is also, I think, in our times where even this part is a kind of politic understanding, I would say, and democratic understanding. So, so after Trump is the Trump area now is starting, I think these structures need to be kept on many levels. All kind of magazines and it will be more and more important to get a low base information system for everybody. I think it's to keep that. I mean, we have the internet, which is clearly the most democratic structure on the one side, but it's the most difficult and dangerous structure on the other side, as we know, or as we see these days.
Maybe at the intersection between art practices and social or political issue, I see many young artists who try to use printmaking in a very simple way. They don't have money to go to workshops, so they work on their own. I think they also look for something that goes very quick into the world. And so there's a lot of interest into lino cut and woodcut too, but I think mostly lino cuts, which is easy to buy and easy to carve, and then easy to print. And I see many artists like Laure Marville, who uses it to, act, to produce some sort of protest posters or a slogan or I don't know what, feminist and social motivations. They're written down. You have figures, you have subject topics, very, very easily drawn, and then they multiply it and they use it as people do in countries where you don't have any other means to express yourself. So I think now there's I don't know, I would be curious in a few years to see how it grows, but I'm sure there's here something that's very new and that escapes all the collaborative environment we talked about, but something very, very easy, very simple, just going into the world with images and words.
So you talked about money, and you said we need to talk about money if we talk about the future. I'm not so sure, but I mean, Inma has experience. You started out printing money, and Chris works in a place where they actually create something out of the void. I just said at the beginning of the second session that creativity is born out of chaos and not of the void, quoting Shelley, but you work in a place where you create something out of a void. Money is created out of nothing, right? Out of debt. I give you $10, you give me 11 back because you have to pay interest, and the $1 difference is how we create money. This is the whole magic of it. So, ignoring that and talking about the future of printmaking and what was said here, Inma and Chris, coming from 2 very different perspectives, but you try to change, or my question then is, why would you collect as a bank? You have this mandate on one hand, but you spend a lot of time in educating the people working in the bank on what art is, what role it can play. Why would you do that, and how does that relate to future for art and printmaking?
Well, I do that because I feel there's a lot of potential in the art collection and spending time with art, with yes, I just feel, especially for people working in a bank, it's actually very good for them to to sort of dive into art. It's also a very good way to have a break, do something completely different. It's, you know, sort of air your head, which is why we have this art education program within the bank. I also have to maybe add that we're actually only 3 in my team, so there's not that much we can do. But one of my team is her job is the art education, and we have various things that we offer, like I mean, sort of theoretical ones, where you basically just listen on a guided tour, but then also discussions of one single artwork where it's a bit more in depth. But then we also have workshops. Those are usually combined or sort of an add-on to small exhibitions that we do within the bank, where the idea is that you can actually do something practical. It's also what Tommy said before, when he has people who are not art students who come to him. This is our way of getting our bankers to in their lunch break, just sort of dive in, feel, touch, smell whatever's going on. We did photograms, we did fluid art, something the last time when the exhibition was on about how do you react to the unforeseen, because that's also a very important topic within the bank and in the working environment, just so that they see it from a different aspect, from a different point of view. We're going to do something now with jelly plate prints. You probably all know what that is. I've never seen it, but my art educator is going to do something with that. What's important in our case, of course, is that it has to take place during the lunch break, maximum 2 hours, and you have to have a good result, so they can take that home. So it is quite challenging to find something that we can do with our employees, but so far it's been okay. If anybody has any ideas.
And do you notice if that encourages private collecting? Like, thanks to this, do you think that thanks to this education program and your collection and the fact that they are surrounded by artworks as bank employees with nicer salary than the average person, do you think that that's encouraged them to become private collectors? Because I think that artists also need, if we talk about money, we need to also encourage and alimент the side of the private collector, not just the institutional ones.
I can't really say, I mean, I can't say that we have a very obvious, clear impact with what we do. I do get feedbacks from employees who say, oh, I saw this painting and I went to the exhibition and I bought something for myself, and they're usually very proud and they send me pictures of it. And I know that these connections have taken place. I don't know how much impact we have as a whole, but it's a starting point. It's better than nothing, and also just getting people to dig in, get their hands into some messy mass over lunchtime they'll probably go off and do something else again, because they enjoyed the experience and the result that they got. I don't know if they're going to become collectors, but at least it opens minds as well. I think it's an attitude and also an openness that we can help encourage with these things. At least I hope so. I think so. Yeah.
So we'll start now opening up to the public. That's why I'm sitting here now. I'm part of the public.
I was gonna...
Inma, I have a question for you, which you have
I was
to.
going to comment, but make me the question.
Because she talks about changing the mind and changing perspectives and getting your hands dirty, right? And a lot of what you talked about, this is a concept we quickly need to introduce if we talk about the future of printing, is thinking with the hands, right? That's something that you do, and Michael does, of course, as well. Can you take that as a starting point?
Yeah, I mean, and actually I think it relates very much to what Chris was saying, because just listening to everyone, I was thinking like, okay, so where is that future for me? And is that, it's something obvious, but I mean that the world, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but at least to me, that we see constantly how things are dematerializing, or I don't know if everybody has a kind of relation to that we, not that things are dematerializing like literally, because we are surrounded by material things, but the way we communicate with each other and the way also we consume images, it is so digital and virtual, and all that also has a materiality behind that. But to me, it stays in a like such a mental level where things lack some kind of embodiment. And so that's why the relationship I have with me working with my hands, I see it as a form of empowerment, that, I mean, and recovering some kind of agency where I can actually do things by myself, or create things by myself, or express things by myself. And well, this is actually what you're doing with, because you said that during the lunch break, they need to kind of have a break and free their space in their minds. And
Please use the microphone.
Yeah, sorry. So I think that actually it is the key point, because what I observe in my surroundings is that people that are not in the art field or making art, that's for most of them the reality that they live. Even myself, that at times I realize, like, how many hours do I spend in front of the computer, which of course it's also like a fair platform where to create, but it's not the space that I think that actually makes me feel alive. So I see that like going back to, or having awareness of how we can use our bodies, and also how the materiality of print, or the things that can generate around print, are just reminders of that matter is alive, and that we can, through art, really have that encounter. That I think that maybe as an artist, part of what I reflect very much is on maybe the responsibility that, I mean, or what can I offer to the world, or how my view can be useful for somebody. And to me, lately, it keeps on coming back to my body and how things materialize. So, yeah.
So I suggest, because we are a little bit late, because we keep pushing the times of our breaks a little bit, I suggest we just take a 5-minute break. I'll stay then with the public, and we'll start having the discussion as an egg, right? Which meanders around, or flummoxes around. So 5 minutes if you need to go to the loo or smoke a cigarette in my case. Yeah, 5 minutes.